Welcome to the M1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and in this episode, we're going to be chatting about rates of fat loss. So, just how fast can you lose fat, and what are the factors at play that dictate the speed of your losses? So, first off, the one and only requirement to lose fat on a physiological level is a calorie deficit, meaning you need to be burning more calories than you're eating in order to lose fat over time. And the simplest way to think about this is via your bank account. If you spend more money than you make, your bank account is going to dip into the red and you're going to go into debt. However, if you make more money than you spend, the money in your account is going to increase. The exact same thing happens in the body. If you expend more calories than you consume, you're going to lose fat. But if you consume more calories than you spend, you're going to gain fat. Now, if you're someone who's been maintaining your weight more or less, that just means you're spending what you're making or essentially breaking even. In one way or another, this is how every single diet works. It creates a calorie deficit in which you're taking in fewer calories than you're expending. There's just no other way to achieve fat loss, outside of drugs, of course. However, the drugs or steroids that result in fat loss are actually still using this same mechanism via increasing calories burned from chemical mechanisms. So at the end of the day, it's still the same thing, a calorie deficit. Now, the degree of the deficit is going to be the number one factor as far as how fast you lose. So if you're spending $500 more than you're making each month, you're going to lose more than if you're spending $100 more than you're making each month. The bigger the deficit, the faster you're going to drop weight. However, there are trade-offs to be made here because the bigger the deficit, the more you're going to quote unquote feel it in a sense. For example, you're more likely to feel hunger more often if you're overspending by $500 per month versus $100 per month. You also most likely won't have as much energy day to day when overspending with the larger amount, which makes total sense because you just have less energy coming in or calories coming in. Now, the absolute fastest way to lose fat is by not eating at all. You can't go any lower than 0 calories, but we all know that that's just not really a maintainable strategy, right? If you want to lose 40 pounds, you're not going to stop eating until you drop all 40 pounds because that would mean you'd be going without food for weeks, if not months plus, depending on where you're starting from, weight and body composition wise. So it's important to find a middle ground here where you're still in a calorie deficit, but supplying your body with the nutrients it needs. Also, consuming 0 calories is a great way to lose fat, but it's also an awesome way to lose muscle. But we're going to dig into some of the strategic stuff after we address all the factors at play. Like I mentioned a second ago, another factor that dictates how fast you lose is where you're starting. So for example, if you're 5'6" and 300 pounds or 5'6" and 150 pounds, the version of you at 300 pounds is going to lose a lot faster than the version of you at 150 pounds because you've just got a lot more total weight to lose at 300 versus 150. So when it comes to relative losses, losing 2 pounds per week for the version of you at 150 is like losing 4 pounds per week for the version of you at 300 because you're literally double the size. I see smaller women specifically run into this issue quite often because they don't take relative losses into account. So for example, if you're a smaller person to begin with and or you're leaner when you begin, you're going to lose less total pounds because A, you've got less total weight to lose, and B, it's relative, meaning a 1 pound loss for you at 120 pounds, let's say, as a percentage is a lot more than a 1 pound loss for you at 180 pounds. Yes, it's still a 1 pound total loss in both scenarios, but 1 pound off of a 120 pound body is a larger total percentage of that individual's weight versus a 1 pound total loss off of a 180 pound body. So be sure to take this relative losses concept into account because if, for example, you're comparing weight loss with your husband, it's not apples to apples if your husband is starting at 250 and you're starting at 150. He's going to lose more total pounds quicker, most likely, because he's got more total weight to lose. Also, I'll mention that this isn't a male-female thing. It's a total body weight thing. So if a woman is starting at 250 and a man is starting at 150, assuming all other things are equal, the woman at 250 is going to lose much quicker on average. So again, it's not a male-female specific, it's a size specific. Now, something to mention on the psychology of fat loss front is it's never fast enough for us. The thing is, the fat loss process is as fast as it is, but let's put an arbitrary number to it just to illustrate this point. So let's say the fastest we could lose weight was at 50 kilometers an hour or 30 miles per hour for my American listeners. If right now you're losing at 50 kilometers an hour, you're going to want to lose at 75 kilometers an hour. Now, in an alternative universe, if the baseline was 75 kilometers an hour, you'd want to lose at 100 kilometers an hour. So the point I'm getting at here is that it never seems to be fast enough, and you're not alone in that feeling because everybody wants it to be quicker than it is. The thing is, it has nothing to do with how fast it actually is in reality, because no matter how quick it was, we'd want it to be faster. That is just human psychology 101 right there. An interesting thing to think about is, hypothetically, if fat loss was even 1 percentage point faster than it happens to be, we might not be here. Humans may have gone extinct completely because starvation was a threat to our survival. So if we happen to burn calories quicker than it turns out that we do, our species might have starved to death, and you might not be listening to this podcast right now, and I might not be putting it together. But wrapping up that point, fat loss is as fast as it is. And while it's completely normal to wish it were faster because we're human and we want what we want as quickly as possible, it's sort of like wishing that gravity acted on the planet in a different way. Gravity acts the way it acts, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. So just surrender to the process and work with what you've got versus getting hung up on wishing it were a different way, because it just can't be. We can control a lot of things, but this isn't one of them, because like I mentioned before, even if you were to eat 0 calories, you can't lose fat or weight any faster than that because you can't eat minus 500 calories. That's obviously not possible. Now, if we were to compare speed of fat loss versus speed of muscle gain, it is a no contest. Fat loss is way faster. I'm talking not even close. I've had plenty of clients lose 15 to 20 plus pounds over the course of a 12-week period, which is quite fast, but there's no way in hell someone is gaining 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in 12 weeks without drugs. It is just not happening. If someone puts on 15 to 20 pounds of muscle on in a year, that's absolutely incredible progress. And I'd say 99 out of 100 times, they're going to be absolute beginners that are training for the first time in their lives. Hence, the muscle gain process is much faster to begin with because they're essentially starting from ground zero. Even with drugs or steroids, adding 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in a year is pretty amazing, and that's with pharmacology. So quite literally injecting supraphysiological doses of anabolic steroids, that's still great progress. So comparatively speaking, fat loss is really fast when you look at it next to muscle gain. Not to mention, building muscle is a lot more actual work because it's not just the food that you need to dial in, you also need to put all the time in the gym because you ain't gaining shit if you're not lifting heavy weights. Movement and or exercise can definitely speed up the fat loss process, but if you work out and then just simply eat the calories that you burned via your workout, any fat loss you would have achieved via exercise is a wash because you just replaced the calories. It's sort of like spending $100 on your debit card, but then going straight to an ATM right after and depositing $100 in cash. It's just a wash. However, if you don't eat more food as a result of the exercise you do, it will speed up fat loss, but I don't actually recommend relying on exercise too much for weight loss for 2 reasons. One, it's just not all that effective. Diet changes are way more effective for fat loss than exercise will ever be. And then 2, what happens if you get injured? If you're relying solely on exercise for fat loss, if you get injured or you can't exercise for whatever reason, you're screwed because now all of that calorie buffering exercise is now gone and you don't have the skills to adjust your nutrition accordingly versus you had just used nutrition as your baseline to lose weight and then potentially supplemented that baseline with exercise. We see this all the time in runners, right? They're running a bunch of kilometers each week and they're lean. And then the next time you see them, some injury popped up, they stopped running and the weight just piled on. This is a prime example of relying too heavily on exercise for fat loss or weight maintenance. Now, it's important to mention when I say I don't like to rely on exercise too much when it comes to fat loss, I'm talking solely about fat loss. There are all sorts of additional benefits to exercise that aren't weight loss specifically. So I'd recommend that you work out for those benefits, but in a vacuum, exercise is just not all that effective in the big picture on its own when it comes to losing weight. Also, it's worth mentioning I don't lump exercise in the same category as movement. They're two very different things in my mind. If you've been following me for any period of time, I'm sure you've heard me talk or post about how important walking is and getting your 8 to 10,000 steps in per day. I separate steps from formal exercise because, in my opinion, walking is like the nutrition version of movement, meaning you have to eat. You don't have the option of not doing so you've got to walk. Your physiology expects it. Once you dial in your steps, if you want to work out on top of that, great, do it, get after it. But workouts do not replace walking. They are supplemental to getting your steps in. So when it comes to this exercise and movement idea, there are 4 general categories that people fall into. Sedentary with a sedentary lifestyle means minimal steps and no workouts. Sedentary with an active lifestyle means 8 to 10,000 steps daily and no workouts. Active with a sedentary lifestyle means minimal steps and 3 to 4 workouts per week roughly. And then active with an active lifestyle means 8 to 10,000 steps daily and 3 to 4 workouts per week. In an ideal world, we want to be active with an active lifestyle. Secondly would be sedentary with an active lifestyle. Third would be active with a sedentary lifestyle. And then lastly, we want to avoid being sedentary with a sedentary lifestyle. That is not how you want to be living. Also, one of the coolest things about walking itself is that it has a great appetite regulating effect, meaning it does an awesome job of balancing blood sugar and therefore regulating appetite. And I know it's not the sexiest sounding strategy, but aside from nutrition, walking is probably the most underrated fat loss tool out there, in my opinion. Now, when I was putting this podcast together, I had a few clients mention they wanted to hear my thoughts on how age, genetics, stress, medications, as well as depression impact rates of weight loss. So let's delve into those things as well. Age. Is it harder to lose weight as we age? Does the metabolism slow down? So the research shows that the metabolism does slow down as we age, but get this, it is only 1 to 2% per decade. So for example, if you were eating 2,000 calories per day at 30 years old, if nothing else changed at all other than your calorie intake, you could maintain your 30-year-old weight at 1,940 calories at 60 years old. So that's like a 20 calorie quote unquote slowdown per decade. That equates to a 2 calorie reduction per year. So that's equivalent to like 3 blueberries. It's nothing. Truly what happens as we age is not a metabolic slowdown so much, it's just a slowdown. So the older we get, the less and less we move. But the thing is a lot of folks don't reduce their calorie intake to adjust for less movement. They just eat the same amount, if not more, but move less, and that's a recipe for fat gain. Now, how do genetics play in here? So some folks have faster metabolisms than others naturally, but this is actually a really small percentage of the population. The vast majority of us are dealing with the same basic metabolism as one another, and then there is a very small percentage of folks that have slower metabolisms than others. But what genetics seem to impact more so than the metabolism itself is behavior that impacts how many calories you burn. So for example, you're at a party and you notice this one person is talking to some people in the kitchen, then 5 minutes later they're in the living room, 10 minutes goes by and all of a sudden they're chatting up folks in the backyard. They seem to be everywhere. They're bouncing around, they're working the room. Then you take the person that sits down on the couch in the living room when they get there, and 3 hours later you look over and they still haven't moved. They're sitting in the exact same spot. Who's burning more calories? The person bouncing around and chatting with everyone, without a doubt. Now, this general tendency seems to be somewhat genetic, You have the classic homebody, and then you've got the token extrovert or busybody. Now, the difference in calories burned between these two individuals at one party isn't going to be that different because it's just one party. But when you compound all of your waking hours over the course of months, years, and decades, that is a huge difference in total calories burned between two individuals like this. Fortunately, these behaviors or types are malleable. You can change them. When I was young, I was a busybody. I never stopped moving. And then in my late teens, early 20s, I was more of a homebody, sedentary type. And now I would say in my late 20s, early 30s, I'm a busybody again. So it sort of begs the question, is it even genetics or is it just the type of lifestyle that we choose to lead? I've also seen complete 180s in my clients I've worked with on this lifestyle movement front. I've had lots of folks go from living a very sedentary lifestyle to being more of that busybody person, getting all sorts of steps in each day, each week, each month. So again, we can adapt. Now, if you're interested in delving a little deeper on this specific topic, I'd recommend listening to episode 87 of the pod titled, How Can Some People Eat Whatever They Want While Others Struggle to Lose Weight? Moving on to stress. So can stress impact rate of weight loss? The short answer here is stress doesn't impact weight loss at all. It impacts eating behavior, and it seems to go one of two ways. So when some folks are stressed, all they seem to want to do is eat. And then on the other hand, there are people that don't even want to look at food when they feel stressed out. So it's not stress itself that impacts weight gain or weight loss. It's our response to stress around eating behavior. How about medication? So can meds impact rate of weight loss? Fortunately, we've got the same situation as the stress. Medications don't cause you to gain weight in themselves. They don't contain calories, but they may impact your appetite and therefore eating behavior. So again, it's not the medication itself, it's how you respond. And meds are also similar to stress in the sense that the response seems to be fairly individual. So for example, one person might take an antidepressant and lose weight, one person might just stay the same or maintain their weight, and someone else might gain weight. So this stuff is really individual specific, and folks are different to begin with. And so it's really hard or essentially impossible to distinguish what is leading to the response. So is it the person? Is it the meds? Is it a combo? There are just too many factors at play here compounding this issue. Now, if everyone had the same response and gained weight after taking a certain medication, it would be super clear that that medication caused weight gain. But that's not the case. And there is a big difference between causation and correlation. So causation is one thing directly causing another. So a calorie deficit, while we're talking about it, causes weight loss. Correlation, on the other hand, is different. Someone might say, well, every time it rains, people are using umbrellas, so umbrellas must be causing it to rain. But of course, we know that's not true. This is an example of correlation. Having said that, some medications can impact fluctuations in water weight, but they do not themselves slow down fat loss. And you can only have so much water retention going on versus you can hold hundreds of pounds of fat on the body. Moving on to depression. Depression seems to fall into the same-ish category as stress and medications as well, because depression itself doesn't have calories, of course. It's a feeling or a mental state, so it can't cause weight gain, but it can heavily impact behavior, which I can attest to personally, as I've experienced a lot of depression in my teens and early 20s. So again, some folks seem to eat more when they experience depression, and others don't want to eat at all, and then there's everything in between. So it's a result of how we respond versus the depression itself causing fat loss or fat gain. Now, personally, when I was feeling down in the dumps, I gained a bunch of weight. You may have seen my before and after photos on my website. I had gained over 50 pounds, so I was overeating in a big way. And as I did more and more work on myself, I had a therapist, which I still see bi-weekly to this day. I lost the weight, and there were a million and one factors at play here. Nutrition is an obvious one. But again, folks seem to respond in different ways to depression itself, and it's highly complex just because humans are highly complex. So now that we squared away all the factors that can play a role in how fast or slow we lose weight, I'm hoping I painted an encouraging picture here because fortunately, in most cases, you've got the power, right? There's only one thing that can slow your rate of weight loss, and that is calories. So that's it. There is nothing else in the universe that can make someone gain fat, which simplifies the solution so much. Now, that's not to say that it's easy, okay? That is not what I'm saying. Weight loss is not easy, but the solution is straightforward. You need to modify the calories in, calories out equation in one way or another. Now, the most effective way to reduce calorie intake is by focusing on single and minimal ingredient whole foods you cook yourself. They're high in food volume, but lower in calories than junk foods. So they keep you feeling nice and full. So that makes life so much easier when you're feeling satisfied or not hungry while eating fewer total calories. Single and minimal ingredient whole foods are also more nutrient dense, meaning they're healthier, right? And they're going to make you feel better across the board. Sense of well-being is going to go up. On the movement front, getting those 8 to 10K steps in daily, and be sure to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep on a nightly basis as well, because the research is clear that lack of sleep typically results in fat gain. Now, does not sleeping enough itself cause fat gain? No. It actually results in an increase in calorie intake by an average of 250 calories per day or so, which equates to an extra 1,750 calories per week and 7,000 calories per month. So get that sleep in. Sometimes I hear folks say, I just want to be there already. I want to be at my goal. And trust me, you don't. You don't want to snap your fingers and be at your end goal, because you need to develop the skills necessary for maintaining your weight loss throughout the actual process of losing weight. 70% of lotto winners file for bankruptcy within 2 years. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't know how to manage it, you are fucked. It's sort of like saying, I want to be a Fortune 500 CEO tomorrow. You snap your fingers and there you are heading up a massive company and you're hit with a barrage of questions like, hey boss, I need your approval on this potential merger as well as this acquisition. And also, what do you think about these asset allocation strategies? You're like, shit, I don't even know what an asset allocation strategy is. You're in over your head. You don't want overnight results because you can't maintain them. You develop the skills to maintain that progress, having the actual experience and going through it. Again, I hope this episode painted an empowering picture for you around fat loss and just how many factors are actually in your control. It's not easy. It's actually really fucking hard, but it's absolutely doable if you're committed to the outcome. Now, if you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can head over to n1fitness.com/coaching or just click the link in the show notes below. Also, follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness and friend me up on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. I hope you found this episode useful. Thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.